Welcome to My Hometown, the program that explores clubs, organizations, businesses, and issues across Nassau and Suffolk counties and sheds light on the different towns that are making a difference.
A great day to you and welcome to another edition of My Hometown. I'm your host, Bill Horan, along with Nassau Community College student John Gallo. Our special guest today is John Farinacci, a partner in the Long Island law firm of Ruskin, Moscou, and Faltischek, one of the region's leading providers of innovative legal services. John is the co-chair of the firm's Trust and Estates Department, and over the years has represented many clients in all aspects of trust and estate law, including estate planning, probate, estate and trust administration, surrogates court practice, and litigation and guardianships. With John's expertise, he has worked closely with clients to help plan family inheritances, develop wills, and manage estates, and has helped clients resolve family disputes that many times arise following a loved one's passing. John is here today to share his advice for avoiding inheritance feuds, which have caused disagreements among family members at a time when they should be grieving and focusing on loved ones. John frequently lectures in continuing legal education programs on law and various trust and estates topics, and serves on the Board of Trustees of the Long Island Children's Museum. John, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you very much.
Now, John, tell us about your practice in trust and estates.
Our practice is really a full-service trust and estates practice. There are a lot of attorneys that practice in limited to estate planning. Some do estate planning and administration, and we do estate planning administration plus litigation in this area. And that's actually where I concentrate a lot of my practices in the area of litigation, which I think enables us to be able to identify for clients at the outset when they're planning their estates how to best avoid disputes in the future, because we see what goes on after the fact.
That just in itself, litigation after someone passes away, is that why it says rest in peace on tombstones all the time? Is that it?
Well, if the family members took the rest in peace part seriously, then perhaps there wouldn't be so much litigation. But unfortunately, human nature is different than that.
That's just the way it is, I guess. John?
Okay, so our question would be, in your professional opinion, is there a particular age or time in an individual's life that is best to address and take care of the estate planning process?
Well, John, that's a good question. I think most people typically think that they don't need to do it unless they're getting on in years, and that's actually not so. Anybody who's got any kind of property or assets should be planning their estates. And even if they don't, for young people who are starting a family, the estate planning process is important to provide for their children. We would give them advice if they don't have money for their children about maybe purchasing life insurance, about naming guardians for their children within their wills, about setting up trusts for somebody to manage their children's assets. And, that's critically important because a lot of younger people neglect it. They think this is something that only older people should be doing.
Okay. I would guess, John, too, people may be leery about spending, like we talked about before, life insurance. These are things they don't want to get into, and yet one little tip from you can save thousands, maybe tens of thousands of dollars, even for an average family, just setting things up correctly or a little bit of advice of do this, not that. And you have the client's best interest at heart.
That's right. I think most people, are reluctant to spend money on legal services. It's just not something that's pleasant for them to think about, particularly planning for their death and facing their own mortality. But when I explain to them what the pitfalls are, they almost all get it. They do want to do what's right for their families, and they care. So, I don't ever have somebody walk out the door and say, no, thank you.
Now, tell us, and this is probably the scary part, the pitfalls of not taking the time to sit down with someone like yourself or their own family attorney and getting down to drafting the will.
For wealthy people, it could be about taxes and having to pay unnecessary estate taxes, what lay people commonly call death taxes. For the average person, it's just leaving the planning of your estate to the state of New York, really. If you don't do anything, the state of New York decides how your assets are going to go upon your death. We can also help people plan for providing for their assets to be disposed of outside of a will by use of beneficiary designations, by use of joint ownership on accounts and real property. But if they don't think about these things, then the state ultimately decides by statute how your estate's going to go. And I'll give you a typical example. Most people who have a spouse and they're in a good nuclear family, a solid nuclear family, and they have children, almost always will give their assets to their spouse first, and then on the spouse's death goes to the children. But New York doesn't assume that. The state of New York assumes that the spouse will receive $50,000 plus half of the balance, and then the children receive the other $50,000. And most of the time, the spouse needs that money to support themselves and the family, and it's not what most people choose to do. So, that by failing to do something, 90% of the time, the people who just allow New York State to choose isn't what they would have done themselves.
I think you just have about 400 spouses lined up at your office when you go back saying, wait a minute, the state's going to write the will and they're going to cut me out for someone else. So
that's right. The state already has written the will. It's in the statute, and it assumes a scheme to dispose of your assets. And I don't mean scheme in a bad way, but a structure to dispose of your assets that is counter what most people do. They do it to protect children. Because they're not going to assume that the spouse is going to take care of the children. But most of the times that is what happens, and people have to be aware that that's what's going on.
So just as a threat, if someone's listening, if they don't write a will, that other wife or that girlfriend or that boyfriend or the cousin that you hate or the child you didn't want to leave money to or the uncle, you may be leaving them something because you didn't take the time to sit and write a will.
That is correct. There's a term that we use in our area of law called laughing heirs, and those are the people that might end up inheriting because you didn't plan, that didn't really care about you and weren't a part of your life. So
you have T-shirts with that, the laughing heirs. That sounds cool. I like that, John.
New club softball team, yeah.
There you go. I like that. Softball team, the laughing heirs.
Okay, so as we were just mentioning some of the pitfalls, I guess we were wondering also what some of the more obvious benefits and maybe more nuanced benefits would be of creating a will.
Well, the obvious benefits are that you get to control how your assets go. People make a lot of assumptions. They think, well, my wife was just going to get everything, or my kids are just going to get everything, and that's not so. Our job is to find out what your priorities are and then help you to plan for those priorities in the best way possible with proper planning techniques. We can do lifetime trusts if that's more appropriate than a will. We can do wills. We will find out if parents, for example, have adult children and they're treating those children unequally. I'm not just going to do it without asking questions, because I need to understand what's going on in the family dynamic to have somebody make that choice, and to be able then to suggest methods to best protect that plan, and to be sure that this is something that somebody really wants to do. We are in a very litigious society, and people, particularly who feel emotionally harmed and hurt by choices that their parents make that they only find out about after their parent dies, are more apt to litigate if they don't understand the reasons, and the only person that could have explained it to them is no longer alive. Mm-hmm. So, there are techniques that we can do to protect that plan, to try to hedge off potential litigation and will contests and the like, and also to really sometimes play armchair psychologist with the clients and to find out,
so he's like Dr. Phil.
Yeah. Well,
a little bit of investigative work.
With more hair. You can't see that on the radio, yes. But I promise you there is. And to find out, is this something you really want to do, because the potential for litigation may outweigh the reason for the parent to be treating their heirs unequally, and they may decide not to do it.
Okay.
John, at this point, I'd like to just mention, if someone's hearing this, and you've got me scared, so I'm sure you scared some members of our listening audience, if they'd like to get in touch with you, find out a little more, can you give us information? How do they get in touch with John Farinacci?
Sure. As you mentioned in the beginning, I'm a partner of the firm of Ruskin Moscou Faltischek, and my direct dial for my telephone is 516-663-6628. You can also email me at jfarinaCci@rmf PC. I realize I'm on the radio. I hope I enunciated those letters well enough.
Now, in case people didn't get that, we're going to give you that information a little later, and we'll ask John to give it a little later. And also, John frequently gives lectures and speaks at institutions, and if you have a group, perhaps he'd even come by and give a talk for you if you're real nice to him, maybe buy him dinner or something, and treat him well also. John, people you were talking about before that unfortunately it gets to be litigation, and before the show you were telling me that's an area you specialize in. Can you tell us if it's not properly drawn, some of the issues that come up that you then face and that would force this kind of matter to court?
Yeah. So as I mentioned before, I try to ascertain why it is people are doing what they're doing. If I anticipate that there's going to be litigation, people have very good reasons for wanting to treat heirs unequally or to disinherit them entirely. And they are adamant that it's not just to provide a benefit to somebody who hasn't treated them well, and they don't want to do it. And it's not my job to judge them for that or to talk them out of it. So if they are intent on doing it, there are several procedures that we can go through. One is what we call a no contest clause. The lawyers actually call it an interiorum clause because we love Latin phrases, but effectively it's
just to confuse us. He's got
it's just to confuse
Latin.
Who doesn't love Latin?
Yeah, who doesn't love Latin?
Which literally means under terror. And what it is you provide in your planning document, whether it's a will or a trust, that if any of the beneficiaries contest it, they forfeit and they lose. They forfeit the right to their benefit. But that only works if you actually give them something. So they have to have some carrot in order to be disincentivized to bring the contest. If you're going to give them something token like $5,000 on $1 million estate, that's not much disincentive. They'll risk the $5,000 to contest. So you have to give them something substantial, something that they're really afraid of losing if they contest the will. Let's just say you have a $300,000 estate and you want to split it equally to two kids and leave one kid out altogether. Well, you might give on those numbers the kid who you want to cut out $25,000, $50,000, $75,000, something like this, something that is worth it for them to take and not risk losing.
And I would imagine even you would show people how to do that. They could get a small insurance policy on the side for that other child, or some. I don't want to take away because maybe I'm giving wrong advice, but there are, I'm sure, ways to handle that. So everybody comes out kind of getting what they want, meaning both the children and the parents, and they avoid litigation, which could be expensive and costly.
No, Bill, that's a good idea. Can I write that down?
You can.
So yeah,
I wrote the laughing heirs, so you can steal that one.
Getting an insurance policy to fund, the benefit that you didn't want to give in the first place is a good idea. There are a lot of ways to do it. The other thing is that, if you have a good reason that isn't really insulting, that really might be accepted by the person that you're not treating equally, there is something to be said about talking to them about it while you're alive. A lot of people are very reluctant to do it because they don't want to have the tough conversation, and they figure, I'll just leave it alone, and when I die, I'm not going to be here to be faced with this anyway. But what happens is, so what if you have one child who has sacrificed a career to help care for their elderly parents? Well, maybe they need more, maybe they deserve more. And if the parents talked to the child who was independent and built up their career and didn't have as much time for them, they might accept it. But what is hard for them to accept is when they can't figure out why mom and dad did this, or they assume mom and dad would never do this, and mom and dad are no longer alive to ask, they're more apt to litigate in that case. So sometimes explaining to them your reasons during lifetime is a good thing, and I always float those ideas by clients to see if it's appropriate in that case.
John, I'm sure you have some fantastic stories. We want to get to those in the second part of the show, but right now we're going to take a short break from my hometown on 90.3 WHPC. Our guest today is John Farinacci, a partner with the firm of Ruskin, Moscou, and Faltischek, and he's co-chair of the Trust and Estate Department there. We'll be right back after this brief intermission.
Uncle Dan?
Mom? Dad?
If you store your guns properly, so not just anyone can get to them,
I'll feel safer when I'm playing outside.
Safer when walking home.
Safer when my friends come over. As your neighbor, I'll feel safer.
As a school teacher, I'll feel safer.
we'll all feel safer.
Your family, friends, and neighbors are all counting on you. If you own a gun, you have a full-time responsibility. When you aren't using it, be sure it can't get into the hands of curious children, troubled teenagers, a thief, or anyone else who might misuse it. Remember, always, lock it up. For more information on firearm storage safety,